We've got a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Monica here. Monica, you are leading ACC, Acceleration Community of Companies. You're the president, one of the leaders there, and it's an incredibly important company when it comes to marketing and building out not just campaigns, but just the way these brands are viewed in the world. And now there's a lot more from a technology standpoint that you're involved in as well, with Definity and using AI to understand audiences better. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Thank you, Ben. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So Monica, how did you get interested in marketing and growing communities? What made you intrigued to enter into this space with and spend a lot of your life in this category?
So I actually started, I went to college in Boston and I studied communication. So initially, I actually wanted to be a broadcast journalist. And so I did study for that. I graduated and I was interning at WHDH in Boston, just trying to get the ropes. And I remember people telling me, you have to go to these very small markets. So I remember I got a job in Elmira, New York, in a barn for $9,000 a year, in the 178th DMA market at the time. And it was like, okay, is this really what I want to do for the next few years? And, I decided maybe it wasn't for me. So I ended up moving to LA, and I ended up getting a job at what is now Rogers and Cowan PMK, but at the time was Bragman Nyman Caffarelli, which was a small boutique entertainment firm whose specialty was merging entertainment with brands to reach consumers sort of where they live, work, and play. Wherever they were passionate about, which at the time was like music, film, TV, fashion, things like that.
Mhm. So, or did you? I mean, you must have seen the creation of ACC then, right? At that, did you watch that happen? Like, what was it like seeing ACC form,
Yeah,
and
I
being
mean,
involved in that?
you've actually interviewed our CEO, Michael Nyman, before. And so I've been
Yeah.
with him pretty much my entire adult career. So when I started at BNC, which it was Bragman Nyman Caffarelli, it was 20 people. And that sort of grew. And then we merged with PMK and it became PMK BNC. And then in 2018, Michael had left to start Acceleration Community of Companies just because he saw a gap in the marketplace and he saw that things were changing and that the traditional holding companies were not moving sort of fast enough for, I guess you could say, the speed of culture. And he wanted to create something that was more about sort of like the people, that was people powered, and could be a little bit more nimble and react to the marketplace quicker. And so that was, late 2018. And then I was president of PMK BNC at the time, but I knew, like, as soon as he was like, I'm going to leave and start this, that I was going to join him. So he started in probably late 2018 and I joined in January 2019. And it's already been 6 years and we're at the end of 2025. And so it's been great to see ACC, which is, an independent network of marketing and communications agencies, all with different specializations, grow from absolutely no agencies to almost 10 right now.
Wow. And how long was that journey, by the way?
ACC began in like late 2000. I joined in 2000. So it's already been 6 years. Time flies by fast when you're having fun.
Yeah. So from your foundation previously, the different marketing companies, you mentioned, PR outlets, et cetera. I mean, what translated over most skill set wise to your leadership now at ACC? I mean, how similar is it? How different is it than from before?
I think um, what is what's very similar is that it's much easier to connect with people when they're passionate about something, whatever that may be. What people are passionate about is now much wider and much more niche. So whether it's gaming or anime or Taylor Swift or whatever it is, the best way to connect with a consumer is emotionally, right? So that hasn't changed. The mechanism and the platforms on which you do communicate with them has obviously changed, right? and attention every year, every moment just becomes so much more fragmented. So the competition for the consumer's mind is what really has sort of evolved and changed, and with it, the consumer. But at the core, it is always about appealing to somebody through something that they love to get them to pay attention. That hasn't changed.
Mhm. So you now have this kind of approach with using Definity, this platform in AI, with audience responses. I mean, has that been something, just audiences in general, the understanding of audiences, has that been something for a long time you've wanted? Like, I would love to just learn more, Monica, about the evolution behind how Definity makes
Definity.
sense for you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, so Definity is our synthetic audience platform. And one of the things that we were noticing in the marketplace, just with different brands that they worked with, is because the public in general can be so sort of like fickle, and there was this concern about saying something wrong or doing something wrong and being canceled, that we had a lot of brands that were just being very sort of analysis paralysis. They were scared to make a mistake. They didn't want to, they were scared to take any risks, right? Because consumer reaction can be very swift and very overwhelming in a short period of time. And so we built Definity, and it's called Definity because it's supposed to give brands definitive sort of clarity on what direction should go. And so it's meant, it is a platform that builds high fidelity digital twins of different stakeholder audiences. So whether it is like, depending on who your audience is, it could be Gen Z, it could be moms, it could be Gen Alpha, college kids. It can be very wide or as specific as you want. But ultimately, we build digital twins, and then we sort of pre-test messaging, creative campaigns, ideas, right? To sort of get a gauge on, what do different client, or what do you think about this idea, right? And so it helps us sort of maybe think about ways, or certain things, if they work and why they wouldn't work, or if they it helps us identify hotspots, right? Anything that we may
Mhm.
need to be concerned about, or give us maybe a perspective that we haven't thought before. So we used it for our Gen Alpha study. We just did, and that was part. It was part of the methodology, and obviously part of it was actually doing focus groups and doing live or doing polls with millennial parents and their Gen Alpha kids. But we also did a synthetic audience, because when you're doing focus groups with Gen Alpha kids who are between the ages of 11 to 14, it takes them a while to open up. You spend half the time sort of like getting answers out of them. And when we build it with Definity, we can get immediate sort of reactions quickly. So it's much more efficient, but it also gives you sort of a different perspective. And in that instance, in our Gen Alpha, we had a live audience and we had a list of questions and answers. And then we also had the synthetic audience. So we could see apples to apples, sort of where the overlaps were, and any sort of new perceptions or things that we may get. So that's how we use Definity. And then we also, which I have noticed in the marketplace, that other companies are also doing that. I see IPG has their own tool. What was the other one? Fleshman Hillard has their own tool. So it's definitely something that I think brands can benefit from. Just being able to sort of test it. We had a brand that wanted to test their sort of quarterly earnings report, and sort of check out, see what we thought investors would say based on what the announcement was. We had another one want to test an ad campaign that was specifically targeted, like Asian tourists, and sort of get the feedback there. So it can be used as broadly or as narrowly as you need it, but it's definitely something we have seen brands really open up to.
Mhm. I think one of the interesting findings from the study was how 11-year-olds or just young people in general, have a lot of influence in their families. Can you just talk about like how you found that and what does that even mean now for brands?
Yeah, we know, right? Gen Alpha, there's, I think, almost 39 million of them, and their ages, I think, zero. Now they're around 2025, 14 or 15, right? So they have $100 billion in spending power. And it used to be where, influence in the younger generations really didn't happen until 16 or 18. But one of the things that we found was that influence starts so much earlier now, that Influence starts at 8 or 9, but really kicks in by like 10 or 13, which is very young. And part of that is that, unlike when I was growing up, they are sharing the same platforms and they're seeing the same content as adults. And because it's, everything is sort of tech driven, they're adapting very much quicker to being able to sort and find trends and sort of recommend it. So one of the things that we found is that 96, I think it was, percent of them act as sort of the family CMO, and they are the ones that are defining what their parents, what they buy, what they do, what they eat, what ingredients, what groceries, what recipes, where they're going on vacation, even like what kind of car they're driving. And because they're so knowledgeable and they're able to sort that information, we were seeing what we're calling reverse inheritance, where trends usually start from, a little bit older and trickle down. It's now reverse. It starts from Gen Alpha and it's trickling up, and
Mm.
parents are listening.
Do you think Gen Alpha is just like incredibly different than some of the other generations you've seen when it comes to how to market to them?
I think Gen Alpha is definitely much more mature, right? Because of the ubiquity of technology, Gen Alpha has direct access to brands and marketplaces. They're able to be a consumer earlier. You think like they don't have the money; it's the parents' money, but they have much more access to money, I think, than people realize, right? Because of
Mm.
Apple Pay or Amazon, right? So they are a buying consumer at a much earlier age. So they may not be big ticket items, right? Obviously they're not buying a car because they're not even driving age yet, but they're making little purchases. Whether it's coffee or a shirt or sweats or whatever. They are a buying consumer and they are spending a lot of money. And then also because they're constantly, good or bad, they're constantly scrolling. They're on social media all the time, and that exposes them to different trends and product launches, and the validation from peers at a much earlier age. And so this is a much more sophisticated consumer, and they are
Mhm.
also they are the least passive generation that we have ever had. And I would say their greatest skill is influence. Is sort of like influencing family decisions, purchasing decisions, and trends.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. They have access to so much more information too, really rapidly. So it's definitely shaping decisions. You also co-authored a book, The Art of Branded Entertainment, that I think talks about a lot of interesting concepts today that are really being built on by AI, and just how brand entertainment has even worked and how it's evolving. I would love to just hear your take on just in general how you see marketing and AI working together. I mean, there's been lots of uses of AI with marketing, but sometimes it's inauthentic. And how you see just brand entertainment in general looking like, in the future with AI.
I think probably the biggest thing that everybody has heard about is just AI's ability to create content that you don't
Yeah.
even need people to do it anymore. Like they can do it. Yeah, I mean, and you're seeing it, right? I can take your picture and I can turn it into a whole video. Or you can give AI direction and say, hey, take a strawberry, make it into a flower, right? And then it will be sort of instant. So I think it's going to be hard. Right now, you can kind of sort of tell, but it's going to be much harder. Sorry, my light went off. It's going to be much harder to sort of decipher between what is real and what isn't. And that was sort of like one of
Mm.
the prediction. And right now, people are very sensitive to it. Right? Is that
Yeah.
they want something that is authentic. You see when different brands try and use AI models, it doesn't get a very positive reception to it. But I think like in the future, it's going to be so everywhere that you're not even going to sort of notice it, right? And that maybe something that is actually handmade or analog is going to be considered much more valuable, I think, than any content that's made through AI. And
Mhm.
I think there people worry, right? Like I had just read that there was an ad agency that you could hire different sort of AI twins of famous
Uh,
people who did ads, right? And so like you wonder, like it does what make those creatives, this, you know, there's a soulfulness to the work, does that translate into work that's created by AI, right? Because that
yeah.
is the thing, things that connect us like kind of touch our soul. And so is that still going to happen in the age of AI? I wonder about that.
Yeah. I mean, do you see AI assisting at all and that becoming like a mainstream way of creating campaigns, or do you think it's still just going to be all done by humans?
I think that I think there's two different way people kind of look at AI. For us, the way we look at it is you still need sort of human assistance with AI. You need to enhance it, not to replace it, right?
Mm,
And that the way that you get the best work is if you have that sort of human touch, sort of guiding it and building on it and adding to it, right? So that's why so you know, again, it's about efficiency and it's enhancement. Actually, I think it's enhancement, not efficiency, right? It will make us efficient, and you could say things could take you know, a shorter period of time, but you still need to be involved. I mean, even today, right? You just take a simple chat GBT. Chat GBT is only as good as the instructions that you give it and the prompt that you give it, right? And the
mhm,
prompt that you give it is inherently human, right? And so it comes from feeling and need, and when, you know, I wonder if we don't have that, what happens. And so for us within our company or in our network, you know, we understand, or our goal is to be able to sort of learn how to use it to just enhance what we're doing, but not replace it.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think the approach makes sense, and definitely enhancing what you're doing. I see becoming more mainstream as everything goes. I don't know if it's ever going to replace people creating marketing campaigns. It's too personal. It's all about
I
emotion.
agree.
It
I agree. That's
seems
a
like
great, yeah.
emotion's hard for AI to figure out too, anyways.
Yeah, and that is and that's, you know, really special. It's you know, when you see sometimes I think when you see even content today, so you see the AI and it has like animal, you know, it'll have like a cute puppy, and then you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, but you know, is that AI?" right? It will make you look, but I'm not sure it will make you feel.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I agree. Um, in terms of your biggest focus now, what is your biggest focus? And where are you spending most of your time today?
I spend a lot of my time, one, trying to understand, just constantly making sure that we are ahead of the trends and understanding consumer behavior, right? Because it is ever changing. The Gen Alpha today is going to be very different than the Gen Alpha 5 years from now, or
Mhm,
you know, and so even within when you look at sort of across generations, and what we're seeing is everything is about sort of hyper personalization and micro niche segments. That's even going to happen within each sort of generation. And so for me, I'm like obsessed with learning consumer behavior and what is driving decisions, because what may drive a decision for a 14-year-old may be very different from an 11-year-old, right? Or even a 13-year-old. And so we spend a lot of time sort of, you know, understanding, you know, what is, how do we stay on top of that? How do we sort of, this sounds so cliche, but break through the clutter? How do we sort of grab and attention? Because even me myself, I know when I'm watching television, I have two phones, and then I'm distracted, and I've got something in the background, right? And so obviously I'm not the only one like that. And so it's always like, how do you stay sticky, right? So I spend a lot of time doing that, and then also, you know, like I said, on technology, what's the best way? Everybody's looking for the best way to integrate AI into their into whatever their organization is, and so it's very easy to get overwhelmed. And we ended up spending a lot of time last year meeting with different companies, trying to spend money and, you know, have something custom AI agents built. And Definity, we ended up using sort of existing AI technology versus like spending that money. But the other thing that we do is answer engine optimization, right? So that's another big
mhm,
thing we've noticed. Um, people are, everybody is using AI, like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is, to sort, instead of Google. So that is sort of a change, or unless you use Gemini. Um, and sort of your brand has to not just be followable, but it needs to be findable, right? And so you need to be able to show up in those searches, and that is very different than SEO. And so it's like teaching brands to sort of understand the difference, and then working with them to make sure that we are using AI as a channel, right? And not just as a tool, because it is another way to amplify your brand, whether it's Gemini or Chat, or whatever that may be. There's like a million of them now.
Mhm. So Monica, just the last question I have, like, what are your biggest goals right now that you're focused on?
Our biggest goals are focused on growth. Obviously, continuing to sort of expand ACC's network.
Hmm.
We have, as we understand sort of the consumer and how they consume and how they buy, right? How does that translate into the different companies within our network, right? So obviously, content, analytics, experiential, PR, but also, social commerce, right? Being able to match sort of the offerings and the agencies and the expertise with how consumers consume and buy today. It's just making sure that we are, because it changes so often, and that we're continuing to sort of evolve and grow.
Well, Monica, thanks for taking the time and doing this. I think I've always liked the ACC approach of how comprehensive it is. That's why I had Michael on earlier before. I think it's a very unique approach, and with Definity here, you're solving for a big problem with understanding audiences. They may have been fairly expensive to kind of go through with a test beforehand. So I definitely like that, and I'm just excited to see the continued growth of ACC and all that you guys do, and look forward to what's to come next. Thanks for doing this.